The rain fell relentlessly on the blue plastic tarp, creating a deafening noise that competed with the heartbroken crying of two babies. On a desolate, dirty street in the heart of Detroit, where the asphalt was cracked and the sidewalks covered in mud and piled-up trash, stood Emily's only refuge. It was a small, makeshift tent put together with sticks and plastic sheets that shook with every gust of wind. Inside, Emily, a single mother of barely 25, hugged her 1-year-old twins, Thomas and Dylan, tight against her chest. The damp cold seeped through the cracks, chilling them to the bone. But the most intense cold was the one Emily felt in her heart: absolute fear. They had been evicted 2 days ago, and this forgotten corner of the city was all they had left. Emily watched the empty street through a crack in the plastic, praying for a miracle, or just for the rain to stop, while her tears mixed with the dampness in the air. Emily's situation wasn't due to laziness, but a series of misfortunes that knocked her life down like dominoes. Her husband had died in a work accident 6 months ago, leaving her alone with 2 newborns and no pension, since the company vanished overnight amid a corporate scandal. Their savings vanished on medicine and milk, and soon the rent became impossible to pay. Now, huddled in that flimsy tent, Emily tried to warm a bottle with her own body heat, knowing it was the last ration of formula she had left. The twins, with their dirty little faces, but innocent, looked at her with big, watery eyes, not understanding why they didn't have a warm bed anymore. The desperation of a mother who can't feed her children is a dull, constant ache, a weight that crushes the chest and clouds the mind, making her question if it's worth fighting against such a hostile world. The street was deserted, gray, and sad. The nearby houses had their windows closed and curtains drawn, as if the whole neighborhood had decided to turn its back on the misery settling on their sidewalk. Only a few cars passed by at high speed, splashing dirty water onto Emily's tent, ignoring that there were human lives inside. Emily felt invisible, a ghost in her own city. She remembered the happy days when she had a roof and a complete family, and those memories hurt more than the hunger. She asked herself what she had done wrong, why life was sending her such a hard test. She stroked the head of Thomas, who had finally fallen asleep from exhaustion, and then kissed Dylan's forehead. "Don't worry, my loves," she whispered with a broken voice. "Mommy's going to find a solution. I won't let anything bad happen to you." But deep down, Emily had no idea what to do next. Suddenly, the monotonous sound of the rain was interrupted by the roar of a failing engine. An elegant car, a sleek black sedan that clearly didn't belong in this run-down neighborhood, was jerking its way down the pothole-filled street. Right in front of Emily's flimsy tent, the vehicle gave one last violent shake and the engine died completely, stranded in the middle of the downpour. Emily watched with curiosity and fear through the opening of her shelter. Who would come to this forgotten place with a car like that? She saw the driver's door open and an older woman, about 68, step out. Even in the rain, you could tell she was high society, with rigid posture and a look of deep irritation. The woman looked at her smoking car and then looked around with obvious disgust, as if just breathing the air of that street contaminated her. The woman, named Victoria Harrington, was furious. She had taken a shortcut suggested by her GPS to avoid traffic on the interstate, and the device had guided her into this maze of dirty, abandoned streets. To make matters worse, her car, a luxury German import that was supposedly never meant to fail, had decided to die right there. Victoria pulled her mobile phone from her designer leather bag, trying to call her insurance or her chauffeur, but the screen showed her what she feared most: no signal. The storm and the remote location had left her cut off. She hit the steering wheel in frustration and got out of the car without an umbrella, feeling the cold water ruin her flawless hairstyle and expensive clothes. "Damn it!" she screamed at the wind. "This cannot be happening to me." She was alone, wet, and stranded in a place she considered dangerous and repulsive. Emily watched the woman from her hiding spot. She could see the distress on the stranger's face, but she also noticed the arrogance in her gestures. Victoria looked toward the sidewalk and her eyes landed on the blue plastic tent. Her expression changed from anger to absolute contempt. To her, that rickety structure was a symbol of urban decay, a visual stain that ruined the landscape. She didn't imagine there was a mother inside fighting to survive. She only saw trash. However, the rain poured down harder, turning into a curtain of freezing water. Victoria, shivering from the cold and realizing she couldn't stay inside the car, which was cooling down fast, found herself at a crossroads. She needed shelter, even if just for a bit, while waiting for the storm to pass or her phone signal to return. Before we see what decision Emily makes about this woman, let's take an important pause in our story. Friends of Tales of Kindness. Life sometimes places us in front of people who represent the exact opposite of us. Emily has nothing material, but she has a huge heart. Victoria has everything, yet she seems empty of empathy. It's funny how the rain makes everyone equal. Under the water, the rich and the poor get wet just the same. I'd like to invite you to go down to the comments and tell us what city you're joining us from today. Also, I want to ask you something very personal. Have you ever helped someone who looked at you with disdain? We are very interested in your experience. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel because the meeting between these two women will change both their destinies forever. Let's go back to the rainy street. Victoria ran toward the only place that seemed to offer some protection, the eaves of an abandoned house next to Emily's tent. However, the roof was so broken that the water poured through anyway. She was soaked, shivering, and visibly scared by the loneliness of the place. Emily, hugging her twins, debated internally. Her survival instinct told her to stay still, not to get involved with strangers who seemed to judge her, but her mother's heart, the one that can't stand seeing anyone suffer, dictated otherwise. She saw an older woman, perhaps the age of her own late mother, suffering in the cold. She knew inviting her into her tent would be uncomfortable. The space was tiny and smelled of dampness and sour milk, but leaving her outside seemed inhumane. Emily looked at Thomas and Dylan and made a brave decision. With trembling hands, Emily opened the plastic flap of her tent. "Ma'am!" she shouted to be heard over the noise of the rain. "Ma'am, please, come in here. You're going to get sick." Victoria Harrington turned around, startled to hear a voice coming from that pile of plastic. She squinted, trying to see who was speaking to her, and saw a thin young woman with a tired face signaling to her. Victoria's first instinct was rejection. Her pride stopped her from accepting help from someone living on the street. Go in there? In that dirty thing, she thought with repulsion. But a gust of freezing wind hit her so hard she almost lost her balance. Her teeth were chattering uncontrollably. Physical need defeated her social prejudice. With a hesitant step and clutching her purse tightly, she ran toward Emily's tent. Upon entering, the contrast was immediate. Although it was still cold, the cutting wind disappeared. The space was extremely small. They could barely fit sitting down. Victoria froze when she saw the interior. Some old blankets on the ground, a few empty water bottles, and most shocking of all, two identical babies looking at her with curious eyes from their mother's lap. The smell of poverty was undeniable, but there was also a scent of dignity and effort. Emily moved to the side to make room for the wealthy woman. "Sit on this blanket. It's the driest one I have," said Emily kindly, offering the best of the little she possessed. Victoria, still in shock and dripping water onto the dirt floor, looked at the young woman with disbelief. "You live here with two babies?" she asked, not with compassion but with a tone of severe judgment, as if it were Emily's fault for being in that situation. Victoria sat down stiffly on the old blanket, obsessively making sure her imported wool coat didn't touch the dirt floor more than necessary. She looked around with an undisguised grimace of disgust, wrinkling her nose at the smell of humidity and sour milk. "How is it possible that you allow these children to live like this?" she snapped. Instead of thanking her for the shelter, she scolded, "This is incredibly irresponsible. They should be in a decent house, not a rat hole." The old woman's words were like physical slaps to Emily, who lowered her gaze in shame, hugging her children tighter. "I do what I can, ma'am," she replied with a soft but firm voice. "Nobody chooses to live like this for fun. Bad luck doesn't warn you when it's coming." Emily took a small towel, the only truly clean one she kept exclusively for the babies, and offered it to the woman. "Here, dry your hair before you catch pneumonia." The atmosphere in the little tent was dense and suffocating. Suddenly, Thomas started to whimper. A high-pitched, persistent sound that was soon imitated by Dylan. Hunger had awakened in their little stomachs. Emily felt a painful knot in her gut. She knew she only had enough formula left for half a bottle, not nearly enough to satisfy two. With expert hands, though shaking with the shame of being watched, she mixed the very last bit of formula with some water she kept in a plastic bottle. "Almost there, my loves. Almost there," she whispered, trying to calm them down. Victoria watched the whole operation with critical, stern eyes. "Is that all they're going to eat?" she asked coldly. "That milk looks way too watered down." "It's basically water. Those children are malnourished. You can see their ribs." Emily, holding back tears of helplessness, gave the bottle to Thomas and then to Dylan, switching back and forth so they both got a taste. As she watched the babies anxiously sucking on the nearly empty bottle, Victoria felt her own stomach growl. She hadn't eaten in hours, and the cold had worked up her appetite. She bitterly remembered the basket of gourmet gifts in the trunk of her broken-down car. Artisanal chocolates, fine wines, imported cheeses, and fancy cookies from a high-end deli. All that was just a few meters away, but the torrential rain turned those few meters into an uncrossable abyss. For the first time in decades, the wealthy woman was experiencing a fraction of the physical need that Emily lived with every day. She looked at the young mother, who had clearly stopped eating to give everything to her children. Despite her haughty attitude and prejudice, Victoria couldn't help feeling a strange pang in her chest, something that looked suspiciously like guilt, though she quickly disguised it as annoyance. "And you're not eating anything?" she asked abruptly. Emily shook her head, smiling weakly at the question. "Mothers eat last, ma'am. If there's anything left, great. If not, seeing them full is enough for me." Outside, the storm intensified violently. The wind battered the plastic sheets with fury, threatening to rip the precarious shelter right out of the ground. Suddenly, a leak sprung right above where Victoria was sitting, letting a stream of dirty, freezing water fall onto her shoulder. "Ah, I'm getting wet!" the woman screamed, jumping to the side and almost crushing one of the baby's feet in her panic. "This is unbelievable. You don't even have a roof that works." Emily reacted instantly, driven by the hospitality of someone who has little but gives everything. Without a word of complaint, she took off her own sweater, leaving herself in just a thin cotton t-shirt, and used it to plug the hole in the roof, holding it up with a makeshift stick. Now Emily was visibly trembling from the cold, with goosebumps on her bare arms exposed to the dampness. But the leak had stopped and Victoria was dry. The old woman went speechless for a moment, watching the young girl shiver to protect her. A stranger who had done nothing but insult her. She adjusted her wool coat, feeling strangely uncomfortable about the sacrifice. "Where's the children's father?" she finally asked, looking to break the tension with a topic she considered relevant. "A man should be here protecting his family. Working, not leaving you thrown out on the street like this." The question, though harsh, opened the floodgates of Emily's deep pain. "He did protect us, ma'am. He was the kindest, hardest-working man in the world," Emily replied, her gaze lost in the void. "But a construction accident took him 6 months ago. He didn't leave us because he wanted to. He left us because death doesn't ask for permission." A single tear rolled down Emily's cheek, cleaning a path through the dirt on her face. Victoria, who expected to hear a story of abandonment, vices, or irresponsibility, ran out of reasons to judge. "I am a widow too," Victoria confessed in almost a whisper, surprising herself for sharing something personal with those people. "My husband, Dr. Harrington, died 10 years ago." For an instant, the social barriers vanished. Both were women who knew the pain of absence. However, Victoria rushed to put the wall back up, clinging to her superiority. "But my husband left me provided for. He was a foresightful and intelligent man. I don't understand how people of your class don't plan for the future. It's an unforgivable lack of vision." Emily didn't get offended. She was too tired to fight against the ignorance of wealth. "Sometimes you plan the future, ma'am, but the present runs you over. We had savings, but Dylan's illness when he was born took them all. Let's take a pause in this shelter battered by the storm and social differences, friends of tales of kindness." It is easy to judge from the comfort of a warm house, just as Victoria does. She sees a lack of planning, but she doesn't see the daily struggle for survival against an unfair system. Emily gave up her only sweater to plug a leak and protect the very person criticizing her. That is pure nobility, something money can't buy. "I want to ask you something from the heart." Do you think poverty is always the fault of the person suffering it? Or do you believe that sometimes life just hits too hard without warning? Go to the comments and write empathy if you believe we should judge less and help more. And if this story is touching your heart, please subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to keep telling these real-life stories. Let's get back to the tent because the night was about to get even harder. The temperature dropped drastically as pitch-black night fell over the city. Darkness engulfed the small tent, lit only by the dim orange glow of a distant streetlight filtering through the plastic sheets. Suddenly, Dylan, the more fragile twin, started to cough. It wasn't a normal cough. It was a dry, deep, metallic sound that shook his little body violently. Emily put her hand on her son's forehead and gasped in pure terror. "He's burning up!" "Oh my God, he has a really high fever!" she exclaimed, hugging him against her cold skin to try and share her body heat. The baby started crying weakly, rejecting his pacifier, his little eyes glassy and lost. "I don't have any medicine. I ran out yesterday and couldn't buy more," Emily sobbed, searching frantically in her empty pockets. Even though she knew perfectly well she wouldn't find anything. A mother's panic took over. A high fever in this cold and damp could be lethal in a matter of hours. Victoria watched the scene with growing alarm. She had raised children and grandchildren. She knew how to recognize when a child was truly sick. That cough sounded dangerous, maybe the start of pneumonia. "That child needs a doctor right now," Victoria said, frantically pulling out her phone again. "I'm going to call a private ambulance. My insurance will cover everything." But the screen still showed that hateful message: no service. The storm must have knocked out a nearby tower, or maybe the slum was just a dead zone for her exclusive network. "Damn useless technology!" she screamed, throwing the phone into her purse in frustration. For the first time in her life, her money and her connections were worthless. She was trapped in a plastic tent with a sick baby and a desperate mother. The reality of human vulnerability hit her hard. She couldn't just give an order for the fever to go down. Emily looked at Dylan, who was breathing with difficulty, making a worrying, wheezing sound. And then she looked out at the dark, stormy street through the crack. She knew there was a 24-hour pharmacy about 10 blocks away, crossing the most dangerous part of the neighborhood, past abandoned factories and dimly lit alleys. She didn't have money, but she was willing to beg on her knees or trade her simple gold wedding ring, the only thing of value she had left, for an antibiotic and a fever reducer. But there was a terrible problem. She couldn't take the babies out in that freezing rain. The cold would finish off Dylan and make Thomas sick too. She looked at Victoria, the woman who had judged her, the woman who despised her. "You are my only option, ma'am," Emily said, standing up and wiping her tears with fierce determination. "I'm going to the pharmacy. I can't take them with me. I need you to stay with them and take care of them." Victoria's eyes went wide with absolute horror. "What? Leave me here? Alone with 2 babies in this neighborhood? You're crazy. You can't leave." "I don't care who you are or how much money you have," Emily told her, grabbing Victoria by the shoulders of her expensive coat with a strength that surprised the older woman. "You're a mother. You just told me. Do you know what it feels like when a child is burning with fever? If I take them, the rain and cold will kill them before we get there. If I stay here without medicine, the fever will kill him. You are his only chance. Just keep him warm and keep putting the wet cloth on his forehead constantly. I will come back. I swear on my life I will come back." Victoria tried to back away, terrified by the responsibility of caring for someone else's children in such precarious conditions. "What if something happens to him? I'm not a nurse. Don't leave me here." But Emily wasn't listening to fears anymore. She only heard the clock of her son's life ticking away. She frantically kissed Thomas and Dylan's foreheads, a goodbye that tasted of salt and anguish, and turned toward the tent entrance. Before leaving, Emily kicked off her canvas sneakers, which were already soaked and useless, and put on some old rubber boots she had in the corner so she could run faster. "If anyone comes near, if you hear noises outside, do not go out. Scream loud. The neighbors next door never help, but if they hear a rich lady screaming, maybe they'll come out of curiosity or fear," Emily warned seriously. It was a sentence that made Victoria's blood run cold, the confirmation that they were alone in no man's land. Emily looked the older woman in the eyes for the last time, passing on an immense burden. "I'm trusting you. Please, don't fail me. And with that plea hanging in the stale air of the tent, the young mother threw herself into the curtain of water, disappearing into the darkness of the stormy night, leaving her heart behind, divided between two fragile little bodies. Victoria was left alone in the gloom, surrounded by plastic sheets that were shaking violently in the wind, like the sails of a ship adrift. The silence left by Emily's voice was replaced by the roar of the storm and the stifled weeping, getting weaker by the second, of Dylan. The old woman looked at the babies with genuine panic. For years, her only interaction with children had been with her grandkids, always clean, combed, and watched by pro-nannies in heated living rooms. This was different. This was raw, visceral survival. Dylan coughed again, a sound that seemed to tear his chest apart and made the ground vibrate. Victoria, fighting back her initial disgust at the filthy surroundings, crawled over the old blankets toward the children. There, it's okay," she mumbled with a trembling voice, not really knowing what to do. Instinct, that thing she thought had gone dormant under layers of snobbery and comfort, started to wake up by force. She reached out her jeweled hand and touched the sick baby's forehead. The heat radiating from Dylan's skin scared her to death. He was literally boiling. "My God, this child is an oven!" Victoria exclaimed, pulling her hand back on reflex. She remembered Emily's instructions. She felt around for the damp cloth on the dirt floor, trying not to get it any dirtier, and clumsily placed it on the little one's forehead. Dylan squirmed uncomfortably, crying harder now. The other twin, Thomas, scared by his brother's crying and his mother's sudden absence, crawled toward Victoria and clung to her leg, burying his tear-streaked face into the fine fabric of her designer pants. Victoria tensed up at the contact. At any other moment in her life, she would have pushed the child away in disgust, afraid of stains or germs. But now, in the middle of nowhere with darkness lurking, that little grip was the only human thing she had nearby. She sighed, resigned to her fate, and with one hand she clumsily stroked Thomas's dirty head, feeling the fine, soft hair beneath her fingers. "Shh, Mommy's coming back soon." She lied, or maybe she prayed, to comfort them both. Suddenly, a gust of wind stronger than the rest slammed into the structure. One of the main poles holding up the roof creaked ominously, and the canvas sagged dangerously inward, threatening to collapse right on top of them. Victoria let out a stifled scream and curled up, covering the children with her body in a reflex act of animal protection. For an endless second, she felt the absolute terror of having no concrete walls, no alarms, and no security guards. She felt in her own flesh the extreme vulnerability that Emily lived with every single night. How can they live like this? How can anyone sleep with this constant fear? She thought, her heart racing. The bubble of privilege she had lived in for her 68 years popped violently that night. There, on the muddy ground, hugging two children of a poor stranger, Victoria understood, for the first time, that money could buy a mansion, but it couldn't buy safety against nature's fury, nor against the fragility of life. Meanwhile, Emily was running through the flooded streets like a shot, driven by desperation. The water reached her ankles, cold, black, and mixed with mud and trash from the overflowing sewers. She didn't feel the cold on her skin. Motherly adrenaline was pumping fire through her veins. She slipped twice on the broken pavement, falling hard on her knees, scraping her skin, until she bled. But she got up instantly, without even looking at the wounds, ignoring the stinging pain. "Hang on, Dylan. Hang on, my love," she repeated like a mantra out loud. The streets were deserted. The neighborhood looked like a hostile ghost town. In the distance, she saw the bright sign of a green cross blinking on and off. The pharmacy was her lighthouse of hope in the middle of the deluge. Let's pause for a moment on this critical night where two women are fighting different battles, but united by the same cause. Friends of Tales of Kindness. Victoria's instinctive gesture to protect the children when the tent threatens to collapse is the beginning of her true transformation. Sometimes we need to be in total darkness to start seeing the light of empathy. I want to ask you something very difficult. Would you be capable of leaving your children with a stranger if it was your only option to save them, like Emily did? It's a decision no mother should ever have to make. Go to the comments and write "trust" if you think Emily did the right thing, or tell us what you would have done in her place. Your opinion is very valuable to our community. Don't forget to like the video to support this story of struggle. Let's get back to Victoria and the sick baby. Back in the tent, the situation was getting worse fast. Dylan had stopped crying loudly and was now letting out weak moans, staying disturbingly still. His eyes were closing, and his breathing was shallow. Victoria, remembering her years as a young mother, knew that lethargy was a terrible sign. The fever was getting too high and the baby's body was giving up. "No, no, don't you dare fall asleep, little one. Fight it," she commanded, shaking him gently. The damp cloth wasn't enough anymore. It was heating up in seconds. She glanced down at her wool coat, soaked through on the outside. Then she looked at her dry silk blouse underneath. She knew skin-to-skin contact was the best way to regulate a sick baby's temperature. She hesitated for a split second, eyeing the child's filthy clothes, battling the last of her prejudices. She closed her eyes and cursed her own vanity. She unbuttoned her heavy coat, undid her expensive blouse, and pressed Dylan's burning body right against her chest, wrapping him in the wool of her coat like a cocoon. "Let's share some warmth, little one. You're not going anywhere," she whispered, rocking him with a rhythm her body remembered from 30 years ago. Meanwhile, Emily burst into the pharmacy, dripping water and mud onto the spotless white floor. The pharmacist glared at her with pure contempt. "Do you have a prescription?" he asked coldly, eyeing her homeless appearance. "I don't have a prescription, and I don't have money," Emily gasped, pulling her gold wedding ring from her pocket. "But I have this. It's all I have left. Please, just give me the medicine. My son is dying." The man looked at the ring, then at the woman, torn between greed and the law. The pharmacist took the simple gold band and examined it under the fluorescent light with agonizing slowness, while Emily felt that every second was one. This beat of her son's heart. The man furrowed his brow, weighing the metal's value against the price of the medication. "It's very little gold, barely weighs anything," he grumbled, knowing full well the ring's value far exceeded the cost of the antibiotics and syrup, but preying on her desperation like a vulture. "It's everything I have, sir. It's the only memory of my late husband. Please, don't bargain with a baby's life," Emily pleaded, her voice cracking and her hands reached out. Finally, the man sighed with disdain, pocketed the ring without giving a receipt, and slapped the boxes of medicine onto the counter. Emily didn't wait a single second to argue for justice. She grabbed the bottles like they were diamonds and ran back out into the storm, leaving her past behind to save her future. The way back was a physical nightmare. The rain had turned the dirt roads into slippery mud traps. Emily ran with her lungs burning, clutching the medicine under her wet shirt to keep it safe. She tripped over a rock hidden in a puddle and slammed face first onto the ground, the metallic taste of blood filling her mouth as she bit her lip. The pain in her knees was sharp, but she didn't stop. She scrambled up, spitting out mud, driven by a force that went beyond human limits. "I'm coming, Dylan. Hold on, my love," she screamed into the wind, fighting gusts that tried to push her back. In her mind, she could only see her son closing his eyes. The fear of being too late was a monster chasing her through the dark, pushing her to run faster than her tired legs could handle. Meanwhile, inside the flimsy tent, a silent miracle was taking place. Victoria, the woman who had never allowed a single wrinkle to mar her clothes, was sitting on the filthy floor, rocking someone else's baby against her bare skin. The shared body heat and the wool coat wrapping them both had created a tiny bubble of survival. Dylan, feeling the old woman's heartbeat and the steady warmth, had finally stopped shivering. His breathing, though still wheezy, had become a little more steady. Victoria hummed an old lullaby, a melody she hadn't sung in 40 years, not since her own children were babies, a classic American folk tune from her childhood in the Midwest. Looking down at Dylan's dirty but angelic face resting on her chest, Victoria felt something hard and cold break inside her. She realized that all her fortune had never given her the sense of absolute purpose she felt right now, saving a life. Suddenly, the plastic flap of the tent was ripped open. Emily burst in like a hurricane, soaked, bleeding from her lip, and covered in mud from head to toe. "I got it! I got the medicine!" she gasped, dropping to her knees beside Victoria. The young mother froze when she saw the scene. The wealthy woman, blouse undone and coat wrapped tight, holding her son skin to skin with infinite tenderness. There was no judgment or shame, only immense gratitude lighting up Emily's eyes. "Is he alive? Is he breathing?" she asked fearfully. Victoria nodded, eyes misty. "He's alive, Emily. He's a fighter, but he's still burning up. Give it to me, quick." With trembling hands, Emily opened the syrup, and with Victoria holding the baby's head, they managed to get Dylan to swallow the dose without throwing it up. It was perfect teamwork between two women who, hours earlier, had been natural enemies. The following minutes were filled with a tense, silent wait. Both women sat together in the dark, listening to the rain hammering against the plastic, watching the little boy's every breath. Thomas, the other twin, had fallen asleep, curled up tight against Victoria's leg. In that tiny space, social barriers completely melted away. There was no rich or poor anymore, just two mothers fighting for a life. "You lost your ring, didn't you?" Victoria asked softly, noticing the missing golden shine on Emily's finger. The young woman nodded, looking down. "It was the only thing I had left of him. But my husband would have wanted me to trade it for his son's life. Gold doesn't breathe, my son does." Victoria felt a sharp pang of shame remembering her own jewelry locked away in safes, cold and useless, while this young girl had given up her most sacred treasure without a second thought. Little by little, the medicine started kicking in. Dylan's forehead started sweating, a sure sign the fever was breaking. His breathing grew deeper and calmer. Emily let out a sob of relief, kissing her son's hand. Then, on impulse, she grabbed Victoria's hand. "Thank you. Thank you for keeping him alive. If you hadn't shared your warmth with him, I don't know what would have happened." Victoria squeezed the young woman's rough, cold hand. "No, Emily. Thank you. You saved me from the storm, and you saved me from my own loneliness. I've been living in a huge empty house for years, surrounded by people who only want my money. Tonight, in this horrible tent, I felt more useful, more human than I have in the last 20 years. It was a confession that surprised them both, revealing that Victoria's poverty was emotional, just as painful as Emily's material poverty. Before we see the radical decision Victoria makes at dawn, let's take one last pause in this moving story. Friends of tales of kindness. Emily, sacrificing her wedding ring, is the ultimate proof of love. She gave up her past to save her future, while Victoria gave up her prejudice to find her humanity. Sometimes, losing something valuable is the only way to gain something priceless. I want to ask you something profound. What is the most valuable thing you've ever sacrificed for a loved one? Do you believe a mother's love has no limits? Go to the comments and type the word sacrifice if this scene touched your heart. And please share this video. Stories like this remind us what really matters in life. Let's get back to it, because the rain is stopping and dawn is bringing surprises. The storm finally ceased, leaving behind a heavy, damp silence. At the same time, Victoria's phone let out a sharp beep from her bag. The signal was back. Victoria looked at the screen, lit up with missed call notifications from her staff and family. People who were probably more worried about their inheritance than her well-being. She could call her chauffeur right now, ask to be picked up in a warm, armored car, go back to her mansion, take a bubble bath, and forget this night like it was just a bad dream. She could leave a few bills for Emily and feel good about herself for her charity of the day. But as she looked at the sleeping twins and an exhausted Emily, leaning against a rotting wooden post, Victoria knew she couldn't go back to her old life. That night had changed her forever. Victoria dialed a number. She didn't call the tow truck. She called her eldest son, an influential lawyer. "Mother, where are you? We've been desperate," the voice screamed on the other end. "I'm fine, Richard. Listen to me closely," Victoria said, with a commanding voice that brooked no argument. "I need you to come pick me up at Elmwood Street, South Corner. But don't come in the sports car. Bring the big SUV, and bring dry blankets, baby clothes, and food. Now." She hung up without explaining anything. Then she turned to Emily, who was watching her confused. "Emily, start packing," Victoria ordered, buttoning her coat, now dirty and wrinkled, with dignity. "Packing? Why? Are you leaving, ma'am?" the young woman asked sadly. Victoria shook her head and smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her tired face. "I'm not leaving alone. We're all leaving. I am not leaving my new grandkids in this mud pit for 1 minute longer. Emily froze. Leave? To where, ma'am? I can't. Look at me. Look at my children. We don't have clothes. We don't have anything. I can't go to your house and dirty up your floors. She protested, the shame of poverty speaking for her. Victoria walked over and lifted her chin with one finger. Emily, you gave me your only shelter when I was just an arrogant stranger. You gave me your clothes to plug a leak. Do you think I give a damn about my floors? Those floors can be cleaned, but my conscience would never be clean if I left you here. Victoria looked at the flimsy tent with determination. This chapter of your life ended last night with the rain. Today, something new begins. Pack the papers, the bottles, and the kids. The rest, that trash stays here. We're going home, Emily. To your new home. 30 minutes later, a luxury SUV pulled up in front of the tent, lighting up the squalor with its powerful LED headlights. Richard, Victoria's son, rushed out with an umbrella, horrified to see the state his mother was in. Mom, good God, you look like a beggar. Get in the car, quick, he shouted, trying to ignore Emily and the children. But Victoria stood her ground in the mud. I'm not leaving without them, Richard. Help Miss Emily with the kids, and be careful. They're my family now. Richard, stunned by the order but obedient to his mother's steely tone, picked up Thomas and the few belongings Emily had managed to save. Leaving that plastic tent behind, collapsed under the rain, was a symbolic moment. Emily didn't look back, knowing that chapter of pain was buried in the mud forever. The drive to the mansion was silent but warm. The hum of the engine was the first song of hope Emily had heard in months. Arriving at Victoria's mansion in the upscale suburbs was like stepping onto another planet for Emily. The high ceilings, the crystal chandeliers, and the warmth of the central heating overwhelmed her. She felt small and dirty amidst such opulence, terrified to touch a single piece of furniture. But Victoria didn't give her time to feel insecure. She ordered the staff to prepare the bedrooms, hot food, and most importantly, a private pediatrician, who arrived in less than an hour to check on Dylan. No one sleeps until these children are taken care of, the mistress of the house declared. That night, after a hot bath that seemed to wash away years of suffering, Emily slept in a bed with silk sheets, her twins safe and sound beside her. For the first time in 6 months, she didn't have to sleep with one eye open, watching out for the dangers of the street. She slept with the peace of knowing she was protected. The next morning, the sun was shining, washing away the remnants of the storm. Emily timidly made her way down to the kitchen, thinking maybe it had all been a dream and they were about to ask her to leave. She found Victoria drinking coffee, impeccably dressed once again, but with a different look in her eyes, something softer. Sit down, Emily, she said. We need to talk about the future. I didn't bring you here for a single night of charity. I brought you because I realized something. This house has 12 bedrooms, and I live all alone in one corner. I have money, but I have no life. You have life and love to spare, but you have no roof over your head. Let me propose a deal. Stay here, not as a servant, but as my companion. Help me fill this mausoleum with the laughter of children. I'll provide the resources. You provide the home. Do you accept? Emily couldn't hold back her tears. Really, ma'am? Are you sure we won't be a bother? Victoria shook her head and pulled a small velvet box from her pocket. Before you answer, I want to give you this. Emily opened the box and gasped. It was her wedding ring, the same one she had sold the night before for pennies. I sent my driver to the pharmacy first thing this morning. I had a very serious talk with that crooked pharmacist and got your ring back. I wasn't going to let you lose the only keepsake of your husband just to save your son. You already did that, and it was heroic. Now, take it back. It's yours. Emily slipped the ring on with trembling hands and kissed Victoria on the cheek, breaking down the last barrier between them. Thank you, Grandma, Victoria whispered, and that word, Grandma, sealed the pact. The years flew by, as they often do when there is happiness. 5 years later, the mansion was no longer a cold, silent place. The garden was littered with toys and bicycles. Thomas and Dylan, now strong, healthy 6-year-olds, ran through the hallways calling for Victoria. Grandma, Vicky. Emily had seized the opportunity to study nursing. She was inspired by that night when her son's life hung by a thread, and she even volunteered at a local community clinic to give back. Victoria, for her part, seemed to have grown younger. She was no longer the bitter woman who lived only for appearances. You could find her in the park pushing swings, or in the kitchen, learning Emily's humble but delicious recipes, like classic American apple pie with a twist from Emily's family tradition. The family they built might have looked strange to society, but it was perfect for them. Victoria's biological children, skeptical at first, eventually accepted Emily when they saw how their mother had come back to life thanks to her. On the day of Emily's nursing graduation, Victoria threw a huge party. During the toast, the old woman asked to speak. "Many of you thought I'd gone mad, taking a stranger from the street into my home," Victoria said, looking at her high society friends. "But what you don't know is that the night my car broke down, I wasn't going anywhere in particular. I was lost, depressed. I felt like my life had lost all meaning. I was empty. When that storm forced me into that plastic tent, and I felt Dylan's little heart beating against my chest, my own heart started beating again. Emily doesn't live here because I saved her. She lives here because she saved me. She saved me from dying of loneliness." The confession silenced the room, and Emily ran to embrace the woman who had become her second mother. Before we wrap up this incredible story, let's take a moment to reflect one last time. Friends of Tales of Kindness, this story confirms that storms don't come to destroy us, but to move us to where we belong. That rain forced two souls in need to find each other. Victoria needed love, and Emily needed protection. They were the perfect pieces of a divine puzzle. I want to ask you one last question. Do you believe in the second chances life gives us? Do you believe it's never too late to change and open your heart, no matter your age? Go to the comments and type "second chance" if this story has given you hope. And please share this video with someone who might be going through a storm right now. Remind them that after the rain, the sun always comes out. Let's get to the ending. Over time, Victoria took legal action to secure her new family's future. She modified her will, leaving a substantial portion to her biological children, who were already wealthy, but leaving the mansion and a lifetime trust fund in the names of Emily and the twins. "This house needs to remain a home, not an asset to be sold," she explained to her children. To many people's surprise, Richard, the son who picked her up that night, supported the decision. "Mom, I've never seen you this happy. Emily has earned it. She was with you every day, taking care of you like a real daughter." It was the final acknowledgement that blood makes you relatives, but loyalty makes you family. Emily didn't keep this blessing all to herself. With Victoria's support, she founded an organization called the Storm Haven. They used part of the mansion's grounds to build a temporary shelter for single mothers in crisis, complete with on-site job training programs and partnerships with local food banks. Emily, now a registered nurse, ran the center, providing not just a roof over their heads but medical care and job training. Victoria, at 73 years old, taught manners and reading to the children at the shelter, often sharing stories from her travels to inspire them. Together, they created a chain of favors that got hundreds of women off the streets, just as they had emerged from that plastic tent. Emily's wedding ring, once a symbol of pain and sacrifice, now shone on her hand as she worked helping others, always reminding her that love conquers all. This story ends here, but its message is eternal. No matter how dark the night or how hard the rain beats down, hope is always waiting around the corner, sometimes disguised as a person who seems like your complete opposite. Emily taught us the value of sacrifice and trust. Victoria taught us that it's never too late to tear down our prejudices and love again. So the next time you see a storm, don't be afraid. Maybe that rain is just clearing the path for your miracle to arrive. Thank you for joining us on this inspiring path.